Howdy folks, this video's topic is red state, blue state. Now we just had the big election and everybody's sitting there wondering, we've got the red states versus the blue state. People are wondering what's going on, why can't people get along, and why is there all these big differences? Well, if you just look at the state maps, it's not real evident. But if you'll take one of those states, either red or blue, and look at it by county, it becomes very obvious. It's not red state versus blue state, it's city folks versus country folks. Okay, why is there this big difference? Well, the big difference is the point of view, the way that people grow up looking at the world. City folks and country folks have two different world views. Now, country folks, educated by Mother Nature and all, understand that truth is external, and that there are some things that are beyond the control of humans, and that we just have to make accommodations for them. For instance, all grass is not created equal. Quarter section of grass in Wyoming will only handle 4 cows. Quarter section of grass in Kansas might handle 20 cows. Quarter section of grass in Kentucky, that nice bluegrass, might take 40 cows. And the carrying capacity of that grass is going to change based on the weather. You have good rain, you'll have more cows. Less rain, it's going to take a little less. City folks look at the world kind of backwards. If city folks have a dog and they don't want to have any more dogs, they take it to the veterinarian to be spayed or neutered. Okay, and what do they call this? Well, they call this getting the dog fixed. Well, I'm sorry, that ain't getting the dog fixed, that's getting the dog broke. City folks, because they grow up in an environment that's all man-made, their whole world is based on a decision somewhere else, get it in their head that they can just decide something and there's no laws of nature that are going to, infringe on that. That we can just decide we're going to do something and make it happen. And a lot of times in city you can do that. But with this big storm that we saw back east, Mother Nature doesn't really care. Now, if we took a typical red state versus blue state topic and try to discuss that, the emotions that go along with that topic would get in the way. So I've picked a couple of items from the news today that are basically blue state versus blue state to kind of illustrate my points. The first one is from California. In this last election, one of the things that the county of Los Angeles did was it voted that all actors and actresses in pornographic movies had to wear condoms in Los Angeles County. Now, to give you a little background on this, pornography in the United States is about a $9 billion a year industry. In LA County, about $1 billion of that industry takes place right there. Now, everyone would think, well, this is a safety thing, this is good, and everybody voted for it. 55% voted for it, and the thing passed. Now, right now, the pornography industry is in the process of appealing this and trying to get the courts to throw it out. And you got to stop and think, well, why would they want to do that? Well, as it turns out, the pornography business has already tried the whole condom thing. And apparently when they did it, their revenues went down 30%. Well, when they saw the revenues go down 30%, they found another way to get around the health issues, a way that they're happy with, their actors and actresses are happy with. And they really don't like the intrusion of LA County voters into their business. Now, LA County voters think that they have voted and they've made it safer for the pornography actresses and actors. Well, no, they haven't. All they've actually done is told these actors and actresses, you got to make your movies somewhere else. So instead of making everything healthier, all they've done is outsource the jobs elsewhere. And you know what's going to happen if these producers cannot make a product that their customers want to buy in LA County, they'll have to go somewhere else. And that, in a nutshell, is what happens when U.S. jobs are sent overseas. You have some kind of action of the government, some regulation, some rule, whatever, that makes it unprofitable to make your product here. You got to go somewhere else to do it. And like I say, this isn't any of the red state people, because most people from the red states, they just assume that the pornography industry didn't have any customers. But in an odd twist of fate, the voters of Los Angeles County have done more to harm their pornography industry than the moral majority or any of these church groups. I mean, the basic thing of it is if the business cannot make a product their customers want to buy, they either go out of business or they go somewhere where they can. Now, the other blue state versus blue state thing, or where the blue state people are shooting themselves in the foot or fighting among themselves, is with the Hostess Twinkie debacle. You've probably heard about this. Hostess Twinkies were in bankruptcy for the second time in 10 years. And going through the bankruptcy restructuring, they went through and they made agreements with all of their unions except one that they were going to have an 8% cut. Now the Teamsters Union, they took the deal that they got. The confectioners and bakers and tobacco workers and whatever, that union wouldn't take it. And then the company said, okay, you know, it's either we have to have this deal or we're going to go out of business. And they started closing factories, and the union, you know, didn't come back to the table. And finally they said, well, we're going to sell Hostess, we can't do business. And then a judge told them to get back together and talk it out, and the union still wouldn't budge. And it was kind of strange because it put the one union at odds with the other unions. And you know, it's kind of strange to hear that the Teamsters, in this case, were the most reasonable of the unions. And the union people seem to honestly believe that if Hostess goes out of business, that the parts will be sold and they'll still get their jobs at the same wages and under the same conditions that they had that put the company out of business to begin with. Now, the other ironic part about this is that one of the big reasons that Hostess is having financial problems is that society's got a lot more health conscious. And whereas every school used to have had 2 or 3 vending machines that had Hostess Twinkies in it, they've all been banned. And who were they banned by? Mostly the blue state politicians who decided that it was better for the school children to not have junk food in school. You know, it's the same mentality that says you can't buy more than 16 ounces of soda pop at a time. Because Lord knows New York doesn't have any problem bigger than too much soda pop. But these are 2 instances where the blue state people are basically hosing each other by not understanding how business works, how the world works. Now, you get to this point and you might be thinking, okay, Deacon Parsons, you're saying that the city people are stupid and the country people are smart. No, that's not what I'm saying. At this point in time, everything seems to be, the pendulum has swung too far to the blue state mentality. But that does not mean that things would get better if we swung all the way back to the red state mentality. What we need is balance right here in the middle, where you got the red state mentality and the blue state mentality getting together and talking to each other. Necessity is the mother of invention. Where you have more people gathered in the cities, you have more problems, more opportunities to overcome those problems, therefore you have more innovation. Without people getting together and living together in cities, we wouldn't have any of the technology that we have. Because Lord knows that the people who invented, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, were farmers. In an agricultural society only, you don't see a lot of innovation, because once everybody figures out how to grow the food they need, you don't have a lot of problems, therefore you don't have a lot of necessity to mother the inventions. And if you look at the United States, you look at Rome, you look at any of the big empires, where they go from being agricultural to urban, in that area where there's a lot of transition back and forth, that's where all the good things happen. That's where all the good things are developed. Where you've got the constraints of Mother Nature still being there, but you have the hope and innovation of the city. And that's what we need to understand, is that it takes both of them. Now, how did we get away from it? Okay, what I'm going to say is going to sound a little strange, but I want you to hear me out. Right now, we've got red state people and blue state people, and for all practical purposes, they hate each other. Whereas 50 years ago, we used to be united, and you could have Democrats and Republicans and still be friends. You could have liberals and conservatives and still be friends. In the last 50 years, we've really lost the ability to get along. For some reason right now, everything's got to be polarized. And I think I know where it happened. I think it is the unintended result of getting prayers out of school. Well, now wait a minute, Deacon Parsons, that just sounds stupid. I understand it sounds stupid, but hear me out. I was raised in a western Kansas town of about 1,200. It was a county seat. My kindergarten, first, second, third grade teachers had been my dad's kindergarten, first, second, third grade teachers. They were friends with my grandma, and these teachers got their teaching license the way Laura Ingalls Wilder's did. She took the state teacher's test, she passed it, she's a teacher. And these ladies were around before the court decision that said you can't have prayer in school. Well, they pretty much ignored it. In the morning, we would have a chapter from the Old Testament and a morning prayer. At noon, we had a prayer for lunch and a chapter from the New Testament. None of these were controversial. Sometimes the teachers did the prayer, sometimes they had students do the prayer. It was always understood that the prayer was going to be generic, you don't beat anybody up. And the chapters that we read in the Bible were basic Bible stories. And people claim, oh, well, that's teaching religion in school. Well, no, it wasn't. The chapters out of the New Testament, the Old Testament, it makes as much sense as studying Greek and Roman mythology. It's part of our culture. The United States culture is based on biblical principles. So whether you believe them or not, to be an American, you need to understand where they came from. Now, the one thing we learned with the prayer was tolerance. You see, we thought at the time that we had a real big religious schism in the school, because we thought we had normal people and Mennonites. And the Mennonites were quite different. And, every once in a while, and like kids do, like humans do, we wanted to say, we're good, we're cool, they're bad, they're uncool. And the one thing that our teachers drove into us is that in the United States, you can believe anything you want to believe. I can believe that my religious beliefs are absolutely right. If you don't agree with me, you're absolutely wrong. And I can stand up and I can say that. But for me to have that freedom to say that, I've got to make sure that everybody else, especially those people who disagree with me, have the ability to do the same thing. So when we had you know, the Mennonites would do whatever they did that was different from us normal people, the teachers would tell us, that's fine, that's their religion. You don't have to do it, but you can't stop them from doing it. And we did things like every once in a while the Catholics would have to have fish on Friday. Well, come Friday, the whole school ate fish sticks. And we asked, I'm not Catholic, why do I have to eat fish? Well, the Catholics have to eat fish, and we're not making 2 meals because there's no reason why you can't eat fish on Friday. So what we were taught was basic tolerance. That just because I think you're going to hell and just because you think I'm going to hell doesn't mean we can't be good friends before we make the trip. And I think one of the unintended consequences of taking that out of schools, out teaching American children from kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, to be tolerant of one another, to let them know that yes, there are going to be people with different values out there. Yes, it's okay for them to have those values. And yes, it's okay for us to talk about them and be friends with them. And just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean you have to be disagreeable about it. And I think that's why we've got to the point we are today. That it's not just, you know, conservative or liberal or Republican or Democrat or red state or blue state. It's people have divided up into these things to where my ideas are absolutely correct. And if you disagree with them, I must destroy you. And that's stupid. And that's what's tearing the country up. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the subject. This is Deacon Parsons saying, love your maker, love your mate, and do what's right because it's right, and devil take the hindmost.